Hi all, I am Shannon Young. I am a math coach.
And I'm Rebecca Orr, and I am a math DRT.
And we will be talking about comparing and ordering decimals in 5th grade today. We are going to get started with our very first task. It's a great one. Are you ready, Rebecca?
Ready.
All right. So what you are going to do is you are going to complete the task on your own if you're by yourself watching this video or with a partner or a team. Before you start your task, there is these field day result cards that you are going to need. You don't need to print them out. You can look at them on the screen. So what you are going to do is you're going to plot and label each girl's name on the time on the number line that you create, which is right here. And then you're going to order their race times from greatest to least. And lastly, you're going to specifically focus in on Kaylee, Ruby, and Monica's race times from least to greatest this time, and use symbols to represent that. While you're doing this, think about how your students might solve these problems, and what tools you might provide for them. There's a QR code that just popped up in case you want to print out the number line. If you want to print it out, go ahead. If you want to just work in a notebook and create your own, you can do that as well. So we are going to pause the video and we're going to work on this task, and you go ahead and pause and go ahead and come back when you are ready. We are back. And so before we get into what comparing and ordering really looks like in 5th grade, let's look at the progression with the best standards. So here are some 4th grade expectations for comparing and ordering decimals in 4th grade. And then here are the 5th grade expectations. The gray part that just came up is what students have done prior to this unit in 5th grade. In the green, you'll see that those are the things that we're focusing on right now. And then the bottom, the adding and subtracting, all of this is leading up to that adding and subtracting of decimals. So Rebecca, when you look at the progression with the best, do you see a connection between the 4th grade expectations and the 5th grade expectations?
So when I look at the 4th grade expectations, it looks like they're rounding, plotting, using decimals. So they're plotting, they're ordering, and comparing decimals to the hundredths. And then in 5th grade, they're doing the same thing, but now they're pushing it to the thousandths.
Absolutely. So students in 4th grade would have had those experiences, but they did not actually, because we're in a transition year, they did not order with our previous standards. So students may not know how to order decimals, and that's okay because we can support them with that throughout this unit. So again, we will be plotting, ordering, and comparing decimals to the thousandths this time. So they're adding that place value on. All right, so plotting, comparing, and ordering decimals. We want to make sure that we are giving our students those concrete, representational, and abstract experiences. Even though they've had those experiences in 4th grade, they've got a new place value now. So we want to make sure we're still taking them through that CRA process.
Okay.
So thinking about reading, writing, and rounding decimals, what are some tools you might use in your classroom?
So when I think about in 4th grade, I know that for decimals, we definitely use base 10 blocks. We used place value charts. We used place value discs so that they could build the numbers and see the place values.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a couple pictures of the place value discs and the base 10 blocks. We want to make sure we start with the base 10 blocks first because those are more representational of the size and representing those decimals, and then move into the place value chips. So if your kids need that connection, that's a good place to start. And then Rebecca, I heard you say number lines as well. And these are actually an essential component to this unit with the plotting on the number lines part. All right, so getting into comparing and plotting decimals. What do you think? You ready for this?
Ready. Okay. Because I know that they did this in fourth grade.
Yep.
So in fifth grade, they're going to be comparing and plotting. But the hardest part is always when they start using the symbols. So how should I go about going from like comparing, plotting, then the symbols? Do we just use the symbols right away with comparing?
That's a good question. So if you think, again, like we just talked about that concrete, representational, and abstract, the symbols are more of that abstract component. So when we're comparing and plotting our decimals, we want to make sure we start with the tools. Start with a place value mat, just like you see in the picture, and some place value discs or base 10 blocks.
Okay.
That's a great place to start. And then making a connection between what they did with what students did with their tools and letting them draw pictures inside the place value charts of the representation of either the base 10 blocks or the place value discs. And then plotting the numbers on the number line and having them use the language of greater than, less than, equal to while the numbers are on the number line.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and it will really help once they're ready to bring those symbols in. And then you can see that place value chart, and it has a white piece of paper over it. It's kind of hard to see, but that, if you use that as a strategy for helping students compare, they're not just looking at the digits and saying this digit is bigger, so I know this number is bigger. We're really trying to get them to look at the place value and each place value at a time. I know this place value is greater, so I know that this whole number, this decimal is greater, or if the digits are the same, then they can slide the paper over to the next place value and think about the relationship between those digits then.
So it's really important for me to use like the greater than, less than before I even bring out the symbols. Like they can still talk about it with the place value disc, the place value chart, and even the number line.
Absolutely. And then lastly, there you go. We have the most abstract part of the comparing, is where they have two decimal numbers and they're putting the symbol in between and they're comparing that way. Okay. with an inequality. So we want to make sure that we are encouraging students. We don't want students to just write this inequality like it is. We want them to be able to read it. So we want them to read it as a sentence or a statement.
So like if I was having the students read that inequality, they would say 2 and 36 thousandths is less than 2 and 42 thousandths.
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
Okay.
All right, and now getting into ordering and plotting decimals, we talked a lot about how the symbols come in towards the end of comparing.
So when they're using number lines, obviously they're going to be plotting them and they are going to compare. They're going to be able to see like least to greatest. But are they going to have to use symbols like more than just comparing two numbers?
They are, and that's kind of the tricky part when ordering decimals. I think when we think about ordering, I just think of placing the numbers in ascending or descending order with a comma in between. But that's part of it, but it's also another part is implementing with the comparison symbols as well. So let's look at an example. So again, with the ordering and plotting, starting with the concrete experiences with our manipulatives inside those place value charts so they can see the value of each of the digits that they're representing. Students may be ready to go from there to using representations on the number lines with or without tools at this point because they've had so many experiences.
Right.
So you don't have to have all of your kids using the tools with number lines, but if it's needed, that's something that you can do to easily differentiate. And then again, we've got the place value chart with a paper over it so they can look at the digits, and that will help starting with the ordering. So if you look at the one with the orange sheet, you can see that this person has actually started to order the decimals on the side. And then students can also order on using a number line, just like they did with the comparing. Number lines really will help them see the magnitude of each number on the number line.
Definitely.
And then
it creates like a nice order, like least all the way to greatest or greatest all the way to least.
Absolutely. And then, speaking of least and greatest, we want to use that language, but we also, with this part, want to use the vocabulary of ascending and descending. Okay. So we don't want to just stick to least to greatest. thinking about implementing ascending and descending order as well.
Okay.
And this year with our new best standards, that language actually starts in second grade. So by the time they get to you, when they've had best for a few years, they'll be pros at that vocabulary.
Okay.
And then last we see this picture. It's a test question, and you can see that the symbols are in where the decimals are ordered from least to greatest. So we want to make sure we give our kids those experiences where they're seeing questions like that as well.
Okay.
Oh, and I forgot, we also want to encourage the use of symbols towards the end of the unit, just like we did with the comparing part.
The more abstract, that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and we're going to look at the bridges next. So here we can see for comparing as well as ordering, we're starting with those tools, those hands-on experiences. You notice this picture at the top here. Why do you think this one's kind of in the middle, Rebecca?
I'm going to assume because that's the bridge between the concrete little island and the representational thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the students are drawing what they did with their tools. And we want to make sure we make that bridge so it's not just a huge jump to using the number lines instead of giving them the drawing.
That makes sense. So they don't think it's just like today we're learning this, tomorrow we're learning this, and they're completely different, but that they are definitely connected.
Absolutely. And then last, you see that abstract thinking as well. And to make a bridge between that abstract thinking, you could actually use the number line and have the students place the symbols in between the numbers on the number line.
Great idea.
And that will make that nice little bridge. All right, thank you so much for joining us, for learning about comparing